What's happening, guys? Hey, I thought I would bring you in on a little project I'm doing for a family member here. This is 2007 Hummer H3, and recently they've been having some issues with the four-wheel drive not disengaging. The light goes out, but the four-wheel drive doesn't disengage. You can feel it kind of binding and grabbing as you turn tight corners, especially on dry asphalt. And the fix on these is generally an issue with the shift fork internal to the transfer case. They were made from the factory for the first couple of years on these out of nylon, and they just wear out and break, and then it doesn't disengage like it should. So the fix is to remove the transfer case, pull it apart, replace that fork with an aftermarket unit that's made of aluminum. So I thought I'd bring you in, kind of show you a little bit what we're doing here, and just give you kind of an update on how to get this done if you ever run into this issue and you need to work on it yourself. So I'm kind of playing catch up on the video here because I got the transfer case out already, but figured I'd show you kind of what's involved here. So I can get down under here so you can see. There are some write-ups on this on the internet, but I have not seen too many videos. So there are 5 bolts that affix the transfer case to the output shaft of the transmission right there. They're actually studs with nuts on them. It's 15 millimeters. It's difficult to get to a couple of them. For what I ended up doing on these was a shallow 15 millimeter socket, and I've got a short stubby ratchet with a swivel on the handle. I ended up using that to kind of allow me to get up in past here to get these last couple. So that worked pretty well. There are 4 bolts with 10 millimeter heads to remove for the front drive shaft. The rear drive shaft has a slip yoke on it that slips into the back of the transfer case. So you'll need to remove the 4 10 millimeter headed bolts from the rear differential, and then you pull the whole drive shaft out. So you see that slip yoke right there? You basically just pull those 4 bolts, the caps, pop it loose from the rear differential, the whole thing slips out. Okay. There are also 2 wiring connectors. I'll show you when I put it back together, but there's one for the encoder motor and one for the speed sensor on the output shaft. This wiring harness kind of lays up across here. It's clipped into a bracket that's on one of the bolts that separates the two. You pull that apart. These 2 plugs come out. So you get that done. Breather hose just pulls off of a nipple on the front of the transfer case there. That's not too bad. What else? I think that's about it. It's also a good idea to remove the shift motor. Some guys call it an encoder motor. From the back of the transfer case, it just kind of hangs down in the way. I pulled the skid plate off of the bottom. Once again, that's 15 millimeter bolts, just 3 of them. Pulls that down out and gets it out of the way. That encoder motor comes off with 3 little bolts, once again with 10 millimeter heads that affix it to the transfer case, and then there's one that goes through this bracket on the back. So again, I'll take some video of this when we're putting it back together, just so you can kind of see how everything goes in. But yeah, not too bad. So 4 bolts there, 3 bolts here, 4 on each drive shaft, 5 bolts that come out of the transfer case to transmission connection, and then you can pull it out. I didn't even use a jack for this. It's not very heavy. It's a magnesium case. I'd say that whole thing weighs maybe 70 pounds. So not too bad. The next step will be to remove all of the bolts that split the transfer case. It's a Torx head. T40 is the size. I'm going to go ahead and buzz those apart, and we'll get into the innards of this thing and see what it looks like. I did go ahead and drain the fluid out of it. It only holds about 1.5 quarts, so I think 1.6 quarts is the spec on that, and it calls for a Dexron 4, which I don't believe is available anymore, but I think you can replace that with the Dexron 6. It meets the same spec. So that's all that needs to be done. I didn't drop the transfer or the transmission cross member. I was kind of prepared to do that if it looked like it would make it easier for me, but I don't think it really does. This thing's light enough and small enough you can kind of just spin it around side to side and get it out of the way. I kind of turned it sideways a little bit and dropped it down through. So save yourself a little bit of time. Leave that cross member in there. You can leave the transmission bolted to the cross member. You know, it's 8 more bolts you can just leave in there. So I'm going to finish spinning these bolts out. We'll get this thing split apart, see what it looks like inside, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, well there you are. I got it split. Took out all those bolts. Just bumped it with a dead blow hammer and it comes right apart. So not too bad. You can kind of see the internals of this Borg Warner 4493 transfer case. This is the little shift mechanism that's driven by the motor. So you can kind of see that. Of course, your chain, and then this is the fork that is suspect. You can see it's made out of nylon. What happens is it wears out right here. See how that slips over? Shouldn't do that. Shouldn't do that. So the replacement, this is actually a Dorman aftermarket. You can see the number there, 600-604. Just the shift fork. And it's made of aluminum or magnesium, but I think that's cast aluminum. Kind of looks like aluminum to me. Aluminium for our Canadian friends. But yeah, it'll just be a process of slipping that old one off, slipping this one on. I'm going to go ahead and check bearings and some other things in here while I'm in here, and we'll clean up these mating surfaces real good. I'll probably just clean those up with I'll probably put a wire brush on a drill and clean those up just to get that silicone off of there. Get it cleaned up real good, degrease that face a little bit, put a little bit of silicone on there, squish it back together. So you can see planetary gears and everything there for your 4-low reduction. But yeah, not a whole lot to this thing. Pretty simple unit. Chain doesn't look to be in terrible shape. It's got a little bit of wear to it, but chain's pretty expensive. I think it's $130 or something. The actual teeth don't look too badly worn, so I think we'll probably leave those alone. Just go ahead and put this whole thing back together. So figured I'd give you a look at where we're at. I'll bring you back here before we seal this thing up. Hey, one more shot I wanted to give you here. There's the difference between the nylon part that's worn out and the aluminum part. And this surface right here is what is missing. See how these are smooth? That little face is worn out, and that's what indexes in the nylon groove here to engage and disengage the four-wheel drive. So GM, in all their wisdom, probably saved $1 or $2 for every transfer case that they had installed here by going with this nylon piece, and we're paying the price for it now. So that's the culprit. Well, as so often happens when you're working on an automotive project, we've hit a snag. I got this thing opened up, pulled apart, started kind of inspecting things. I think bearings and things look pretty good. This is all roller or ball bearings in here. They're well lubricated. The fluid was dirty, but still feels pretty good. It's got good viscosity. The issue that we found is these transfer cases have an internal oil pump. You can kind of see them right back in. See it back in here. And I don't know if you can see the little pickup tube that drops down off the bottom. It goes right to there. There's a screen that goes on there. That's what it looked like when we opened it up. The screen was just barely hanging on by a thread. Just got a real fine wire mesh in there, and it's designed to filter out all the gunk. A lot of this that's on there is non-metallic. It almost feels like silicone, so I think maybe somebody's been into this before. They had it open. There's even some little pieces of like red RTV on there, which is curious because this thing wasn't sealed with red. So I don't know if somebody was in here before and they tore this up and left this little surprise for us or not. This part is dealer only, of course. Nobody has it in stock, of course. And it's a Saturday, so I'm kind of stuck. Probably going to have to wait until about Tuesday when that part comes in to take the 2 minutes to snap it back on and then start reassembling this thing. And unfortunately, there's really not much I can do between now and then. I can do just a little bit of cleaning, but I can't put the transfer case back together. Can't reassemble anything until I have that part. So I guess we're on hold for right now, but we'll wait a couple days until we get that little screen. Believe it or not, that thing costs $53 and change or something for a stainless mesh on this little stupid clip. But it's the right thing to do, to wait until we get that part. The problem with leaving it off, I'm sure it would pump oil just fine, but any metal or particulate that gets into the oil will end up in the pump. And it'll gum the pump up, or if it's metallic, it can chew the pump up and wear the pump out. And the problem with that is all of the worn metal from the pump ends up being pumped out into the rest of the transfer case through the fluid. And we don't want to do that. So we wait. At least until Tuesday. So we'll cover this thing up, let it sit here and marinate in its juices for a couple of days until we put it back together. And then we'll go again. So I guess that's it for now. Thanks for watching.